Hello, sisters, and welcome to Go Solo Live. This is Jennifer Buchholz with Transform Via Travel. It's time to sit back, grab a cup of coffee, and listen to my conversation with Kathy Polkrabeck as she shares about her first solo travel and all the ins and outs of it with no technology back in 2001.
Welcome to Go Solo Live.
Don't you mean Go Solo Live? Have you ever been asked, why on earth would you travel alone? Go Solo Live not only answers that question, but celebrates life as a midlife solo traveler. This is a safe place for women to come together to reminisce about their travels, encourage others to travel, and to dig into the real lessons learned from these journeys. Now join Jennifer Buchholz with Transform Via Travel as she and her guests share stories of the solo travelers of midlife women.
Joining me today is another friend from the Midwest, Kathy Polkrabeck. Welcome, Kathy.
Thank you for having me.
I'm so glad to have you here. And where are you based right now?
I am based in Chicago, Illinois.
Excellent. Just a little bit south of Milwaukee where I'm based. So we're experiencing some of the same summer weather.
Yeah, if you could call it that.
Good or bad right now. So I know it'll already be fall when this episode airs, and I'm hoping that we have a nice, long, extended summer based on the junk that we've been dealing with so far.
Me too.
So let's start talking about your solo travels. And I think when you shared a little bit about how you got started traveling solo because your friends didn't have the interest or the time, that's a really common story. So can you bring us back to those times where you wanted to maybe go with people and it just wasn't happening?
Okay, yeah. So I was living in Japan and I've always felt a strong pull to Vietnam. And this was a long time ago. I've always felt like, even growing up, I like learning about the history of, the Vietnam War, and I have no connection, like no one in my family was over there, and colonialism, and just really felt drawn to that. And I had a break coming up, and everyone who I was friends with had either already been there because they'd been in Japan for a while or had other plans. And so I decided to make that my first solo trip. So I booked a plane ticket for 3.5 weeks. I flew into Ho Chi Minh City. I took buses and trains up north and flew out of Hanoi.
Fantastic. So that's a nice, 3.5 weeks is a nice extended long trip, but this is your first solo trip.
Mm-hmm.
So how were you prepared for that? How weren't you prepared for that?
Well, I kind of wasn't, because I think that's really hard to prepare for something when you don't know what you're getting into, especially if there are language issues involved. So I packed my little backpack, and it started on a very weird note. I had a layover in Kuala Lumpur overnight, and I had booked my hotel, and this was the days before you paid with credit cards on the internet. So I booked my hotel. I was armed with a phone number, and I get to Malaysia and find out that it's the Grand Prix. So,
oh boy.
Yes. So there are no hotels in town. So I'm like, it's all right. I booked mine. And I go to the information desk. No one is at the airport to pick me up like they said they would be. I show the guy at the info desk this scrap of paper with a phone number, and he said, that's not a phone number. Like, you're missing all these digits. It was pre like, you didn't have the internet on your phone. You didn't have the internet everywhere. So
way back when, in the old days?
Way back when. Like, even at the information desk, the guy couldn't just say, well, I'll just look up the hostel and see where it is. He was like, I've never heard of this. You're missing some digits in the phone number, but I can call around and see if there are any hotel rooms. So I say, thank you. He calls around and he goes, the only thing that is available is a suite at the Ritz, and it's either the Ritz or the Four Seasons, and it's $400. And this was those are the year 2001 dollars, so $400. And I say, I'm a backpacker. I can't afford that. And he's like, okay. So I decided to get into there was a van service to downtown Kuala Lumpur. And I was like, I'm going to get in this van and I'm going to have the driver drive me around and I'm going to find a place to stay. So the van driver is like, what's your deal? Where can I take you? And I'm like, I don't know. And I'm with all these other people who are going to their hotels. And he's like, we'll find you a place to stay. I'm like, all right. And I just sat up front by him as all these people got on and off the van. There were a bunch of Japanese tourists and I translated for them.
I was going to say, so you were speaking English.
Yes, in Kuala Lumpur. Mm-hmm. So I translated for them. I got them all set up in their hotel. I translated. The driver told me the best shopping areas. So I told them where to go shopping the next day. And he would hop out of the van, park the van, hop out, go to hotels, and they were all booked. He'd go and try and find me a room. And I said, well, just leave me here. I'll be fine. I'm going to walk around. It was about midnight. And he goes, I am not leaving you here. That is stupid. You get in the van. We're going back to the airport. And I was like, no. And he's like, yes. So he was very adamant. And he was my guardian angel, for sure.
Right.
And so I had so many of those on that trip. And so we go back to the airport and he's like, you can sleep here. It's 24 hours a day. And I'm like, thank you. And so then I go and sleep in the airport. Oh yeah. And there's another part to this too. I sleep in the airport. I get a chicken sandwich, which will become important later. And I wake up and there's this little Japanese lady looking over me. There are 2 rows of seats back to back. And she's leaning over, looking over me, and she starts speaking to me in Japanese, which I'm a blonde American woman. I don't know why she knew I could answer back. And she was like, those men were watching you. And I've been sitting here making sure you're okay.
No way.
Yeah. And so I looked up and there are these men and I'm just like, hey. And her son comes over and he's a physician who is volunteering on a medical mission in Cambodia and he knows perfect English. So we hang out for a while I'm waiting for my flight. And I eventually get on the plane and I get to Ho Chi Minh. And then I realize I go to my hotel room and I'm so stressed out and I'm so scared and there's no traffic in a developing country because there's just every kind of vehicle and animal and I'm so overwhelmed. It smells like diesel. I go to my room and I throw up and I'm afraid to leave because I'm like, why did I do this? This was dumb. Everybody was right when they said I shouldn't go by myself. And eventually I get hungry and I get up the courage and I'm like, I'm going to go walk around the block. I'm not going to cross the street. I'm just going to see what I can find.
Right.
And I did it and I found some food and I went back to my hostel and was fine, went to bed, threw up again the next day.
No.
And realized that I had gotten food poisoning
from stupid chicken sandwich,
which I never would have eaten had my non-existent hotel existed.
What is happening?
Yeah. So I soldiered on and eventually I decided to cross the street and eventually I decided to get on a bus to go to another city and I met all these awesome, amazing people along the way who just sort of helped me on my journey. And I was throwing up and having other stomach issues along the way, but that seemed like a side note,
Wow.
Yeah.
So can we just make sure that we understand that you're a solid 24, less than 48 hours into this 3.5 week trip?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Awesome.
Yeah, it was awesome.
What comes next?
So what comes next? So it was before Americans really traveled to Vietnam. The only Americans I met there were veterans, from the armed services who are coming back to kind of pay their respects and heal and all that stuff. So I met a couple of Canadian girls and we hung out and everybody kind of followed the same path. So I'd see them from city to city. One night I was on a bus and there's a scam that they pull where you pull into a town at your destination at 2 a.m. and they're like, oh, you must be so tired. Stay in this hotel.
Oh.
Right. And it's they get a kickback for bringing the people to the hotel. So me, two girls who were traveling together, a guy who was studying to be a Buddhist monk, and this crazy Italian lady were all like, no. And the bus driver was like, fine, good luck to you. And so we like took off. It was in Hoi An. So we took off walking to find this hotel, and we finally find a room, 2 rooms, and the 2 girls and the guy are in a triple. And then I went with this Italian lady who I'd never met before. And we go, and there's like a king size bed, and it's the first time traveling by myself. I'm like, this is weird. I'm going to go with it. And she turned out to be amazing.
Okay.
She turned out to be awesome. Like, we watched MTV. She's quite a bit older than me. And she's like, oh my gosh, these are videos from the 80s. Do you remember the 80s? And I was like, yeah, I remember the 80s. And we ended up traveling together.
Okay.
And she lived in Italy during the summer, but every winter she lived in Thailand.
Nice.
And she was a hairstylist. And I had dyed blonde hair with horrible roots, and she'd always say, well, when we get to the next big town, I am going to buy some hair dye and I'm going to fix those roots for you. And this woman was a total hippie, just free spirit, like not into material things, not into appearances. And she goes, and you should be wearing makeup. And I was like, what? And she goes, yeah, you would look so pretty if you tried. And I was like, it's 90 degrees with 90% humidity. Like, who's wearing makeup?
I don't want to try.
I don't want to try right now.
I love it.
Yes. So we traveled to a couple cities together, and then we parted ways. And she told me about her first solo trip, which was to Egypt in the early 80s. And she didn't know English yet. So she was just this tiny Italian lady who wanted to see the pyramids.
That's brave, right?
Super brave.
Isn't it awesome to hear those stories though? Like, that's one of the things I love most about connecting with other travelers is it's like, you got some bravery, you got some courage.
Absolutely.
It's awesome.
Yeah. And so it ended up that we parted ways, and her camera had broken, and she was like, can you send me copies of your pictures, as one did in the year 2001. And I was like, okay. And so I ended up, she also wore Birkenstocks and said that people in Italy made fun of her because she wore socks with her Birkenstocks and the toe was messed up. And because I don't know, there was a thong that separated your toe or your big toe from the rest of the toes. And I was in Japan and saw these socks that were separated. Like, each toe had a different, like gloves for your feet.
Right.
So I sent her copies of the pictures and the toe socks, and she in return sent me a bunch of Italian makeup.
Okay. I'd call that a win-win.
Yeah, because she was like, okay, you don't have the excuse. Like, it's not 90 degrees. You can wear some makeup now.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So, like, that is my favorite solo woman traveling story, just like the bonds that were forged.
Well, that's really intense.
Mm-hmm.
So how old were you, and what were your, like, key personal, like, lessons at that point that you kind of used to guide your future travel choices?
I was probably 23 or 24, and future lessons were just to be open to talking to people, because you don't know who you're going to encounter or what's going to happen. Flexibility. If you miss the bus, chances are there's going to be another bus, and there's no need to freak out. And I think the most important one was take tiny steps. Like, if you're scared to cross the street, go around the block. And then, like, branch out from there.
Absolutely.
And I also learned that if you are confronted by scary looking streets, follow the old people, because they have been alive for 70 or 80 years. They haven't been hit by anything. And especially in Eastern cultures, there's a lot of respect for older people. So cars aren't going to hit them.
I'd say that's a pretty good tip in general, is follow the old people. They've figured it out.
Right, right. They've survived for a long time.
Wow.
Yeah. And when you're crossing a street that's crazy, don't move in fits and starts. You want to keep one consistent speed and walk in a straight line so that the motorcyclists and other people can gauge your speed and move around you. So that was another important lesson.
Those are very good lessons. So so you were back in Japan, life continues on. What were the next major trip for you?
What was the next major trip for me after Japan? Oh man, it all blurs together.
I understand that. So the reason I'm asking it the way that I ask it is like, I'm not asking it from a technical standpoint of where on the calendar did it occur. I'm actually looking for your inspiration. Like when you think back, we often have that calendar in our mind of the major events. I'm really curious, like what is standing out for you next, whether it's where you went or the lessons that you've learned.
What was standing out for me after Japan?
Yep.
I think after Japan, I did a lot more friend-based travel to see people because all my people were so branched out all over the world. I visited Vancouver a lot because one of my best friends lived in Vancouver, and we've actually taken a vacation together every year for 13 years, like since our Japan days.
Awesome.
Yeah. And I vacation a lot in England now because two of my friends, one was from New Jersey and one was from England, and they got married, and I'm godmother to their children now. So
yeah, there we go. I mean, so it does start to all kind of come together, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So when you think about, your solo travel and these connections that you've made, is that something that you're traveling now to see the friends? Are you also seeking those relationships, or are you just letting them naturally evolve?
I feel like I'm letting them naturally evolve, and it's so gratifying to think about the people when we met or when we started, and just to watch what's going on in our lives and getting married and having kids and traveling in a new way,
Absolutely. Of course. So when you're looking at what's coming up for your own future,
Mm-hmm.
what role does travel play in that?
Oh, I'm always going to travel.
Okay.
Always, always, always. And even when I go see the couple who lives in England with their kids, I always make sure I hit a new country. Like I use that trip as kind of a springboard.
Beautiful.
Yeah, to go see other parts of the world. Because I haven't really explored Europe because Europe just hasn't appealed to me. I've done lots of South America. I've done lots of Asia, a little bit of Africa, but I don't know. So it's an excuse for me to go learn more about Europe, I guess.
So one of my friends has mentioned that her goal was to go see more of the uncharted territory when she's younger, and that like Europe will always be there.
Yes.
And I know that sounds very blasé. First of all, Europe is not just a place.
Right.
But I love that you're talking about how, your planned travel overseas then leads to additional exploring, because that just makes a lot of sense. So what's your mechanism for making those decisions though? Because again, I'm thinking there's a lot of people out there who are going to a place for a reason. We're going to a wedding in the Caribbean or in Mexico, or you're going somewhere for something. But what's your decisions for your add-ons, your where else's?
That depends a lot on where my miles will get me.
Good process.
Yeah. My last trip to England, I took my parents, and because Icelandair has opened all these gateways in the US, flights are really cheap, and you can have a free 7-day layover on the way there or on the way back. So that's how I chose Iceland.
Isn't that amazing? That's actually, I talk about that Icelandair deal all the time.
Me too.
Girl, that's who we need to talk to about sponsorships. We'll get to that in another conversation. But hi, Icelandair. We both love you.
Yes.
But it's amazing because there's so many people that want to go to Iceland. And I don't know that they ever really look at that as, not that they don't look at it as a destination. I don't know that everybody looks at that as a possible gateway.
Exactly. Like, why wouldn't you? My parents and I got round trip tickets, Chicago, Iceland, London for, I think, $572.
What?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That is amazing. So then what did that trip look like? How long did you stay?
We only had 10 days. So we flew from Chicago to Iceland and we stayed 3 full days in Iceland and then 5 days in England.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. So one of those recommendations, of course, is watching the deals directly from the airlines, which I love. Mm-hmm. But have you heard of Next Vacay?
No.
Oh my gosh, especially living right in Chicago, you need to add them to your list. So it's Next, just NEXT VACAY. Mm-hmm. And it's really, like, from the end user standpoint, it's super simple because all you do is subscribe to their personalized deal list. And so every day or two, I get an email that just gives me the one great deal right now out of Chicago.
No way.
Yep. And so I can't even keep track of how many amazing deals I see. And did I recently see something? It was like out of Chicago to Auckland, New Zealand, which is one of my favorite places. And I know the trip was right around $1,000.
Whoa.
Round trip from Chicago. And it was like anywhere between August and October. So they give you the details and then you would click the link and make your decisions at that point. It's just a deal that will not last long. Like, they're not providing the details. They're just providing whatever that search service is.
Yeah.
But I will tell you, especially people living close to hub type airports.
Yes.
Wow. And I know there's a ton of great resources out there like Travel Zoo. Do you have a favorite?
Do I have a favorite? I know I'm really late to the party, but I have been really loving Google Flights.
Yes.
That's
Google
my
Flights.
go-to. Yeah. It's just like, you have to be careful because a lot of the super cheap flights that come up are from consolidators, which I won't use because if you miss your flight or it gets canceled, you're kind of screwed.
Agreed.
And I prefer to deal directly with the airline or through like Expedia or Orbitz or something. But they also have a similar feature, not quite as by the seat of your pants as Next Vacay, but you just type in, I think, show me the cheap stuff from Chicago, and it comes up. Yeah.
I like that. I mean, again, for some people, it's not about the where they go.
Right. Exactly.
It's about, I have the next 5 days and I have $200 to spend. Where are all the possible places I could get to? And then I can choose from, so show me the world and I get to choose where I go rather than trying to input all of these possible destinations. So I love that. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I'm the person who always visits. Like, if you move somewhere, I don't care where it is. It can be in the middle of Bufu nowhere, but I am the person who always visits. Because why wouldn't I? Like, I have a free place to stay. I live in a hub city, so it's going to be either a cheap flight or a quick drive. I will visit you wherever you are.
Absolutely. And again, we were lamenting earlier about some of the struggles of living in the Midwest, but living in the Milwaukee, Chicago area, we have access to 3 pretty major airports that can get us to all different parts of the country pretty quickly, which is a nice feature.
Mm-hmm. And Milwaukee has some good deals.
Yes, we do.
Milwaukee has great deals, and you can just take the Amtrak directly to MKE from Chicago.
It's a winner. That's for sure. Mm-hmm. Although, just in case you hadn't paid attention to the news, I think Elon Musk was just saying how he wants to build a tunnel from downtown Chicago out to O'Hare.
Yes.
Fascinating.
And apparently they're working on a hotel where you rent a hotel room and it can travel through those tunnels, but you would never leave your room.
Okay. That may happen in our lifetime.
Maybe.
You never know. We're
You
going to take
never
that
know.
one thing at a time. You see those new super high speed trains. So
Yes.
anything can happen. The
Mhm.
other site that I wanted to give a recommendation out for is the Hopper app on your phone.
Oh yeah. Uh-huh.
I just love having that at my fingertips. I use that in conjunction with Google Flights. I consider them pretty friendly. I will also give a shout out because Hopper, I thought, had made an error in rebooking my return trip. And when I asked them for help, they were on it and they honored every obligation and their service was outstanding. So I worry sometimes about booking through a third party.
Yes.
And so when I have a good experience doing it, I want to make sure to share that.
And I really enjoy on the accommodation front, Hotel Tonight.
I've only used it a little. So that's a good point.
Yeah. If you catch it at the right time, you can be a baller. Like you could get some pretty sweet deals.
I find that one interesting too, because it's working off of a moving target. So Hotel Tonight is one that they have an algorithm that is tied directly into the supply and demand type of situation. Not every hotel in the area is using it, but their goal is to sell out of hotel rooms. And so when I was talking to a hotel manager at one point, they were talking about they call around to find out what are the prices that everybody's offering and what is their occupancy, and throughout the night will adjust their rate.
Shush.
Not kidding. It was fascinating. So just those little lessons that you can learn by taking a minute and having a conversation with a professional.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I find Hotel Tonight to be good for mid-sized cities where there's not a ton going on. Like St. Louis,
right?
When the Cardinals are not in town, you can find like a 5-star hotel for $100 on Hotel Tonight.
Nice. So those are tips and tricks that, I think they also just take practice and commitment. Please know, like I have access to some really great deals, but they don't always work out.
Right. You're always taking a risk with the deals. Like that's the dark side of travel deals.
Well, and you have some people who are all like the sunshine and roses and I'm like, I got a deal. And then you have other people that are the Debbie Downers and they're like, it never works for me. It's really somewhere in the middle.
Right. For every like amazing Priceline deal I have scored, there's been one where it's been totally, can I swear? I'm sorry, I don't know.
Let's not.
Okay. There's been one where it's totally cruddy and out in the middle of nowhere hotel in a strip mall. Like for every 5-star experience, there's the 1-star experience.
Exactly. And okay, so we're going to go down this path just one more step further. Have you done HomeAway, Vrbo, Airbnb, thoughts and feedback?
My thoughts on Airbnb. Okay. I love it in theory. I think it's more useful if you're familiar with the neighborhoods of the place you're staying. Sometimes, especially if I'm traveling alone, I like to be more in the middle of things. And I find that Airbnbs are often in quiet residential neighborhoods. I think it was a better deal. This is me being like an old curmudgeon. Back in my day, you too. It was
yes.
Yeah, it was a better deal because now I find the prices are comparable to hotels. And if I can get a hotel room with amenities, and this is my like kicker, and someone who will come clean up after me every day, I'm going to pick the hotel. And I'm not like a horrible hotel guest, but like, it's just that's a vacation, like to come back and have your bed made and your towels refreshed. I really like Airbnbs, especially for large groups.
Yes.
Like I went and stayed in Louisville at an Airbnb for a bachelorette party, and there were 10 of us, and we stayed in a huge house owned by 2 sisters with like 8 bedrooms and 8 bathrooms and everything. Like they had a music motif throughout the house that was really, really cool. So in that case, it worked out really well. But
that sounds wonderful. But you're right. I think your assessment of that situation was pretty much on point. And one thing that I know that I will do in the future when using Airbnb is once I get the exact address, which only comes after registering. So I'm always really careful about the the cancellation policy. But once I get that exact address, I will Google Street View the place.
Yeah.
I ended up at a place in New Orleans, and the location was actually perfect. It was really like 3 doors down from a place where my conference was. That was great. However, the entrance was in the back of the building, and I was hauling 2 50-pound bags of equipment and marketing materials. Ooh. And it was way in the back, uneven, up a set of stairs, down a set of stairs. I mean, I was over the river and through the woods before I could get to my room. And I was arriving really late at night, and I was leaving really early in the morning. So that part was uncomfortable to me. And I would not make that same choice. So once I get that information about where the room actually is.
Yeah, especially if you're traveling. It makes a huge difference if you're traveling alone. And New Orleans, as a rule, is wonderful, but also super sketchy.
Mm-hmm. Now, and again, in that instance, I had somebody who'd already checked out the area. So I knew I was in an okay, safe area. It was more, I just didn't feel really good about all the ups and downs and the late nights and the lack of some lighting and things like that. So,
right.
Lessons learned. I mean, everything turned out fine, but we want to be aware. And part of the reason why we bring this stuff up in conversation is so that if that's something that's a concern to someone, they can just file that away in case that comes up in the future.
I kind of wonder if that was designed by a man, because men don't think about stuff like that. You know what I mean?
Oh, without a doubt. And hauling those bags, and I will say, like, it's one thing if you have like a slope that is it has a long slope up, but these steps were really tall steps. And yeah. I'm 6 foot tall. So for me to say that they're really tall, especially when hauling 50-pound bags, like that was a lot. And so that's the other part that's interesting is I am at least aware of sort of what we'd call the ADA accommodations. And I don't believe that there is anything clear on the Airbnb site that is an indicator about whether it's really ADA friendly or not. And maybe there's a risk in them doing that. There could be a bunch of different reasons. But if there was an indicator for me that kind of said, wheelchair friendly or something like that, that would be a helpful clue about what does your physical ability need to be just to get into your room.
Right. Exactly. That's a very good point. Yeah.
So, yeah. And that's not an issue we deal with at hotels.
Right. Exactly. And if there is a problem, there's someone right there who can assist you.
Well, plus there's a concierge and a bellman and whatever. I'm sorry. Yes. We're getting off track now.
No, but those are nice things.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So as we continue this conversation, I want to make sure that we get a chance to hear a little bit more about your podcast, the work that you do, and I'd even like to get into the how'd you get started.
Okay. Sounds good. Well, my podcast is called XX Will Travel. It's a podcast for independent women travelers, and I co-host it with a woman named Inez Belina. How did it get started? Well, it got started as all wonderful things do with beer.
Yes.
Yes, Midwest. I feel like that's a Midwest thing.
Amen. All the best ideas happen over a beverage. And even though I'm from Milwaukee, I don't drink beer, but we make really good wine in Wisconsin too. I don't want any write-in comments about that. You'll have to come and drink it with me before you can judge.
And distilleries.
You betcha. Yeah. All right, Miss Kathy, continue, please.
Okay. So we were on a bus. We were going to a Chicago Fire soccer game, and it was 3 of us. And I said, I would like to start a podcast. We were all pretty well traveled. And I said, I would like to start a podcast about women's travel. And the other 2 women said, okay. And it just sort of happened that way. Once we committed to it, we saw it through. 3 became 2 eventually. It's one woman had other interests and didn't really have time to commit because, it takes a lot more time than you first anticipate. And this is the end of year 2, season 2, and we just released our 50th episode yesterday.
Congratulations. I love that milestone.
Me too. I didn't even realize it until I was counting, and I was like, holy, Holy moly, we just hit 50.
That's
So,
awesome.
mhm.
So tell me a little bit about who your guests are, because I would like to encourage our listeners to at least listen one episode of your show and then subscribe and listen to a whole bunch more.
Yes.
So give a little sampling of who people would be finding when they listen to XX Will Travel.
So we have 3 general, I guess, subgenres. One is like city guides or country guides, where we bring in, it's, if my co-host and I have both been to the place, we do the episode. If there's always got to be at least 2 people who have been to the place. And if only one of us has been to the place, we bring in a third person who's been there, and the other woman acts as the interviewer. So,
Nice.
yeah, so city guides and country guides. Second kind of episode are philosophical episodes. Like, we're doing one coming up about the meaning of home. Like, what is home to you?
Nice.
For Thanksgiving, we did Tales of Gratitude, and we had people send us stories about the kindness of strangers when they were traveling. And those have a lot of listener input, actually. And then the third one is practical tips. So we have a series, a how to travel series, because someone approached my co-host and was like, I don't even know how to buy a plane ticket. And part of our show is designed to appeal to people who are thinking about traveling, all the way up to the like woman traveler who's backpacking solo around the world. So
That's awesome.
Yeah. If a guest has a certain expertise, we always, try to find interesting people. We were talking about Wonderful before we started recording. So we had the CEO of Wonderful on just to talk about travel entrepreneurship. Our latest episode has a woman named Ann Becker, who's been leading trips to Costa Rica and Nicaragua and Panama for 11 years and really likes to take people off the grid and make it a more experiential vacation.
Nice.
We had a super interesting woman named Jennifer Poe, who is a writer who has lived in Argentina, and she is a Black woman. And Argentina, I think, during the 2010 census, only 0.4% of their population identified as Afro-Argentine. So, yeah.
That's a big deal.
Yeah. So she came on, she wrote a book called Ola Morocha about her experience, and came on and talked about what it was like to be like the Black woman in Argentina.
Sure.
Yeah. We actually, like, one of our first guests, this was a total accident, her name is Eliza Reed, and she was the founder of the Iceland Writers Retreat and later became First Lady of Iceland.
Wow.
Yeah. She, for a very brief time before her husband left office. So, and that's our most popular episode, is our Iceland episode, because everybody's going there,
Yes.
And she had a really compelling interview. So
that's fantastic. Well, it sounds like you guys have a lot of awesome content that you're sharing with your listeners.
Yeah, we try. Well, and another thing that we feel kind of a responsibility about is to showcase all types of women who travel, because I feel like if you look on a travel blog, like I can find myself on a travel blog, except like 20 years ago.
Sure. I can hear that.
It's the 20-something blonde woman backpacking around the world. And so we feel like it's important to showcase women of color and older women and, LGBTQ travelers. So that's super important to us.
Yes.
Because I feel like they don't have the visibility that the typical travel blogger does. And that's super important.
No, and I mean, that's partly why I started to tell these stories, because too many times, whether it was me or hearing stories from others, it was, that is so weird. Don't you have any friends? Don't you have anybody that you could travel with? And I'm like, this is actually a choice.
Yes, it is a choice.
And a good one.
Mm-hmm. And a valid one.
Right. So no, that's where this all originated, was that I was so tired of the story not being reflective of my experience that I want to work on changing the narrative.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's so important, especially in these crazy, I don't know what your listener or your political leanings are, but just like, I don't know, telling stories about different types of people, I feel like now is more important than ever.
I agree. Well, let's make sure, Kathy, that everybody knows where to find you after this episode so they can stay connected.
Okay. We are on, our website is xxwilltravel.com. We are on Instagram and Twitter at xxwilltravel. If you go to our website, you can sign up for our newsletter. So that is once a month, full of travel tips and pretty pictures. And we also are on Apple Podcasts because it is not iTunes anymore.
Right.
And Podbean, Stitcher, Google Play, and wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts.
Fantastic. And we'll put all of those in the show notes as well so people can connect and they know where to find you. But as we are wrapping up our time together, which went way too fast, it usually does, I suppose, I would love to hear what is coming next for you, whether it's with you and your travel or the podcast. What is on the horizon that we're going to have to look forward to as we watch you?
Oh, what is on the horizon? Well, I'm going to San Diego next week. So that's like the immediate horizon, and going to explore Baja, Mexico a little bit.
Awesome.
Drink some wine. Apparently there's a very good wine region called Valle de Guadalupe. So we're going to go hang out there for a bit.
Perfect.
I'm hitting a milestone birthday this year, and I have a dream trip planned. I don't know if I'm going to pull it off, but I would like to go fly into Stockholm, go over to Helsinki, take a boat to Estonia, and then take a bus down through Latvia, Lithuania, and end up in Poland.
That sounds incredible.
Yeah.
So why is it a maybe?
That's a good question. I think I would ideally like to do it at the end of the year. So I do have a day job, so I have to make sure I have enough vacation time because I don't want that to be a week. So that is why it's a maybe. It depends on the day job and the vacation time, and I still have to work out flights. And I ideally would love it if people could join me, like just not for a leg, for a couple days.
Absolutely.
So I have to put that out to the universe too. But so it's well, I've been thinking about it a lot. And Estonia is fascinating. Like, it's got this huge IT community. Like, Skype was invented in Estonia. Who knew?
I love it.
And a beautiful, like, UNESCO World Heritage City Center and islands off the coast. And yeah, and they're actually, like, I don't think it was part of the Soviet Union, so I don't really think of it as Finnish, but apparently it's really similar. Like, Finnish people and Estonian people are from the same stock.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Who knew? Well, the only other tip that I'll give, in case you haven't been exposed to it yet, is Tim Ferriss's book, The 4-Hour Workweek. Are you a fan?
I have not read it, but it came up. It came up earlier this week for me.
See?
Among a group of friends. Yeah.
That's a sign. That's a sign that you've heard it twice now. The reason I mention it is for those of us who are still working real jobs, and I use real in air quotes because it's a very obscure term, but I would encourage folks to take a look at that book, because what he does is he has suggestions, very tangible suggestions and evidence of how he put processes and systems in place in his work life to reduce his time at work and get more productivity from his time as well.
Yeah. Like taking the cruddy parts of your job and subcontracting them by, because you value your time more than that $10 an hour you're spending to subcontract them, which I thought was interesting. Yeah.
It really is something, though. And to me, one of the things that's so valuable to me is doing what I call worthwhile work.
Yes.
And doing work that just makes me, stare with my eyes glazing over at the screen is not what I consider worthwhile.
Right.
So it helps have that conversation as well, because it just gives you examples. So I encourage you, Tim Ferriss, The 4-Hour Workweek. It was a game changer for me when I read it just a few years ago, and I will continue to refer back to it.
Excellent. I will take that advice, since, you are the second person to mention it.
It's a sign.
Mm-hmm.
Kathy, thanks again for spending your evening with me.
Thank you for having me. This was really fun.
And we're going to be signing off. Wasn't it great to hear the stories that Kathy shared with us today? We shared a lot of great tips and ins and outs of travel, so I hope you took notes. If you love these stories and want to help support Go Solo Live, you can do that by making a small financial contribution to the show. There's lots of options with some great gifts of appreciation. Just go to www.patreon, that's patreon.com/Go Solo Live and show your love. Now we've reached the end of today's episode, but the conversation doesn't have to end there. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter at Go Solo Live. And remember to invite your friends to listen to our episodes as well. If you're interested in being a guest, reach out to me directly at Jennifer@transformviatravel.com. And until next time, remember, go solo, not alone.